And welcome everybody. We're going to do a little talk on the intro to plant-based nutrition. My name is James Marin. I'm an integrative registered dietitian, environmental nutritionist. I'm the co-founder and COO of Married to Health. And Married to Health is a integrative dietetics practice. I co-founded that with my wife, who's seen here in the picture. She's also an integrative registered dietitian and gut health expert. She's really our star of the practice with her IBS and SIBO knowledge, and really taking an integrative and plant-based approach to SIBO and IBS, which is really not done in the mainstream. That's a whole nother talk we can give. But if you do want to connect with us, you can find us at Married to Health. You can scan the QR codes along the way, or again, you will get a copy of this presentation. And really, our practice can be summed up by our tagline, heal with each meal. That is 4 words that really encompasses what we believe and what really the research shows, and especially the latest research shows, of how a single meal and every meal we eat can really alter and shape our gut microbiome, and therefore can alter and shape our health over time. Again, this is us, Married to Health. It's been a brand we've been building. It's been more than that, but our mission and our passion. And really, like, our website and social media is just kind of a side note to our mission of seeing patients and working in medical nutrition therapy. But there is that important element of reaching out and educating, just like I'm here talking to all of you. We all have now, through social media and through the amazing internet, that is a solid foundation for so many to educate and outreach and really touch patients and help so many people out there. So this is our team. Our team has grown. We have a total of 7 dietitians, including myself, all integrative, all plant-based, and all with their own specialty. So we now are a virtual practice. We see clients all over the world, and we have patients from Australia and Canada as well as the US. So what are we going to be talking about today? So today we're going to get into plant-based nutrition, but I am going to give some context. I want to touch on modernization. I've got to give that context to what's happening. What is this? And as you all are seeing, and I want to leave time for Q&A, so take notes, or if something pops in your head, write it down, and I want to discuss it. I want to get into a really great conversation and save time for that. But it's this context of, you're seeing so many extremes. You're seeing someone like the Liver King, and then you're seeing someone like me talk to you about plant-based nutrition, right? When has this happened, in modern history? And we're seeing these extremes. So we're going to talk about that context, that modernization, defining plant-based nutrition, the latest research, patient outcomes, what we like to call the inner ecosystem. And then I want to give you some resources to take away from this. So let's get into it. So what are we seeing? We're seeing this kind of polarization, right? And we can look at it in history. And I really want to give this context of kind of past agricultural practices of crop rotation. And you guys don't have to be an agricultural expert. I'm an agricultural nerd. That's my environmental nutritionist coming out. I love to garden. But I think overall, we're all kind of aware that we're seeing less hyper-local farming. We're seeing more large multinational corporate farming and that corporate farming structure. And even for me, we're located in Orange County. We live in Orange County. Why is it even called Orange County? And it was named Orange County because it was a massive hub of citrus farming, and there were orange groves everywhere. And there's still some remnants of that. You'll see orange trees and avocado trees, and it was much more than citrus. But now I think if we were to name it today, it would be called Real Estate County, right? And there's a reason for that. And I don't blame, the farmers who sold their land for multiple millions of dollars to make way for tract homes and real estate. And now we're seeing California being the most expensive place to buy a home in the country. So we're seeing this shift, right? And so with that, we're seeing what we need more of. We're going, wow, we've really lost this idea of complementary planting and hyper-local farming, composting, mulching, animal-plant synergy, local food systems, food sovereignty, right? Where we have control of these food systems. We know what's going into our food. There's not a need for for those of you that follow like Food Babe or all these Instagram pages or advocacy groups going like, hey, properly label food, or what are the ingredients, or what's kind of hiding in what we're eating. We have the control. And I think for most of human history, we have had that control. And all of this will translate into healthy topsoils, healthy soil microbiome, and nutrient-dense food. What we need less of, and this is according to a lot of the research, and I think many of you have seen articles on this, even if you're not really diving deep into it, but we're hearing about monocrops, right? And this idea of monocropping food, where you're just growing acres and acres of corn. If you drive through the 5 through Bakersfield, or if you're in Nebraska, you're seeing acres and acres of corn, or acres and acres of cotton, or again, a singular crop being grown in massive amounts. And this is kind of getting into that industrialized farming model where we're relying on fertilizers, we're relying on pesticides, we're relying on concentrated animal feeding operations where the animals are not too healthy, and there's lots of antibiotics being used, and genetic modification of the animal itself. In the case of, we now have genetically modified salmon farms and genetically modified feed for the animals. And what this is translating into is we are growing our crops for better transport and profitability, not for nutrition. We're getting dysbiotic soils, and we're getting nutrient insufficient food. I put TBD because there's still studies being done, but that's kind of the theory, and that's kind of what we're seeing. And you can kind of see that in hyper processed foods. So I want to kind of break this down a little bit and just kind of press pause. And from where I'm coming from, I have been 13 years 100% plant-based, and we'll get into the why of that. I'm fine with eating select animals. I know this is an unpopular opinion, and I get labeled as like a vegan, but I wouldn't label myself that. I'm 100% plant-based, but I do understand, and we see patients who eat animals, and I'm okay with eating animals. I think just in the proper and selective way. I think a really good metric is 80% plants, 20% animals, and that aligns really well with some well-done research that we'll kind of get into. And I'm not fine with abusing animals. That's where I do kind of agree with the vegans of using these CAFOs and kind of hurting and overly abusing animals. I think dairy is one of those industries that really, really does the abuse really well. So we need to be more conscious and careful with that. I would overall say carbon is not an issue. Endocrine disrupting chemicals is where we should focus on as a major, major issue. And where we're talking about health and the environment, and when we're talking about food systems, endocrine disrupting chemicals should be a major forefront talking point. I would say plants can provide all nutrients, but lifestyle can take some away. So we can get into more of that. I do not believe in mock or lab-grown meats. So even though I am plant-based, I'm not a proponent of like, yeah, you should eat that hyper-processed, hyper-refined plant-based meat. Or we're getting into the biotech side of eat the lab-grown synthesized meat. I'm not a proponent of that. Plants are key to regenerative farming, and most importantly, I saved the best for last. Microbes love plants, and their success is our success. So when we're talking about the gut microbiome, your microbes, that the trillions and trillions that outnumber your human cells, love to eat and thrive on plants. So that is of high note that we'll get into. So let's kind of define plant-based a little bit here. So there is a spectrum, right? So you heard me kind of say 80% plants and 20% animals, which is a goal for a lot of our patients in our private practice. Majority of our patients are not plant-based. I think as we build our practice, as we continue in our practice, there are more and more, but really the goal is to incorporate more plants based on the research. And here we have a spectrum of, on one end, you could be a carnivore, right? We're hearing about the carnivore diet and the keto diets, and just meat 3 meals a day. And there's some who are proponents of this. We're hearing more speak out of like, you got to eat meat and just meat, eat testicles and liver and heart and, sticks of butter, and that's it. And so then on the other end, you have the vegans who are like, don't harm any animals. And we've heard of and know of some people through 6 degrees of separation who even in all their projects, they're like, you gotta watch out for the insects and you can't kill or harm anything. So we have these extremes. And along that spectrum, there's a lot of truth and there's a lot of good. And what I just want to point out is defining plant-based for us and really according to the spectrum is really once you're tipping over that 50% mark, you're plant-based. Your majority of your diet is plants. That could be 51%, that could be 60, 70, 80, 90, or 100%. You are plant-based. And more importantly, if you'll see these green arrows, what's important to understand is that many have very adaptive microbiomes that can facilitate you being plant-based easier than others. And we'll get into this. And this can be a talk in and of itself. So please keep in mind this is an intro to plant-based, and I would love to come back and do a part two. But understand you have those friends who are like, yeah, I went vegan, I'm going to do that tomorrow. And they go vegan, everything's fine. You have those friends that are like, if I eat too much broccoli, I'm bloated and don't be around me because I'm letting go of some gas and I don't feel well, right? So we know those people. And this really speaks to the gut microbiome. This speaks to genetic diversity. And we're hearing, and I'm sure all of you are learning about, or hopefully you're researching or have heard about gene mutations, and where some can be more adaptive to pull and proliferate nutrients from plants and others are not. So this is a big this is where I think the spectrum kind of lies, and where we see people move towards one end and others, polarize to another end. It's really speaking to their gut microbiome and how they digest. So a lot can be said here, but just giving you some context on plant-based and how that works a little bit. So what is the research saying? So there are tons, hundreds, if not thousands, whether it's epidemiology, meta-analysis, randomized control trials, prospective, right, studies, crossover studies, and I just pulled just some highlights, just some of our favorites that kind of are in the middle of the spectrum, I would say. And whether you do enjoy eating chicken and fish, or maybe you're lacto-ovo, or you're pescatarian, or you're full-on vegan, or 100% plant-based, I think we can agree with a lot of these statements that I pulled from some of these studies. And again, I'm more than happy. I'll supply you a lot of our studies, and we're working on building a tab on our website with all the studies broken down by category. So that's a goal of ours. But there are so many studies. And so, for example, the Human Gut Microbiome Project in San Diego is doing great research. They're doing citizen science where they were collecting poop samples essentially. And from those samples and intake forms and the data they were collecting, they found a massive correlation with those eating more than 30 plants per week had more microbiome diversity, right? And that microbiome diversity is correlated with better health outcomes. And you go, wow, that's pretty cool. Or maybe you knew that, maybe you didn't. But what is that plant diversity, or 30 more plants? We'll get into that. But spices are included, different varieties of onions and apples. And so those all count as different plant varieties, right? So there's a lot. And just to give some context, there's over 800,000 types of plants in our world that we've categorized and noted. About 40,000 of those are edible. And the average American is nowhere near eating that variety or diversity, right? They're not even meeting the recommended fiber intake, which we'll get into more. But with this, plant-based diets decrease the risk of cancer, heart disease, metabolic syndrome, type 3 diabetes, which is dementia, and the list goes on, which you're seeing in a lot of these really well-done studies. 6 servings of fermented foods are associated with a healthier microbiome and healthier outcomes. So we're talking kimchi, we're talking sauerkraut, kombucha, right? And kombucha, I'll say specifically without added sugar, where it's resembling more of a fermented soda, right? We don't want that. We want the actual real stuff. Really great study showing for every 10 grams of fiber, mortality decreased by 10%. Pretty crazy stuff. 100% plant-based diets in children. This was a study done in Germany that looked at over like 100,000 children. It was the Vichy youth study. 100% plant-based diets in children did not indicate specific risk compared to an omnivorous diet. So comparing 100% plant-based to omnivores and looking at those comparisons. And in here, guys, what I really want to note is looking at who's funding the studies, looking at obviously motives of studies are just as important as looking at study design and being updated on the research, and even just going into PubMed and spending hours and reading. But it's, what are you reading? Who's funding that? Where's that coming from? How are they designing this? Because we all know statistics and data can be manipulated. So that is extremely, extremely important. So when we're looking at studies, we want to look at different varieties in that hierarchy as you may be flashing back to your, statistical analysis classes or classes you've taken to understand research, and thinking back to that hierarchy, taking kind of not just cherry picking, but taking the totality of evidence and putting it together and combining it to really say, wow, in the gut research they're saying this, and the cardiovascular research they're saying this, and pediatric and elderly and metabolic research. So there's so much research going on, and it's kind of taking a nice healthy slice of the research and taking a taste of it in its totality, right? So very important to do. And what is this? I kind of want to break this down rather than just go to like a he says, she said, look at this study, look at that study. I kind of want to break this down into just something more real, right? And something more real that we're seeing is going here. Here are some of the top 4 eaten foods. Maybe you ate some of these foods today, and I'm showing animals, but whether it's beef or chicken or fish or pork, you're eating these animals likely, right? Because they are the 4 top consumed animals in the world. And what we have to understand is what we're talking about when eating animals. And I will admit, animals can have great nutrients and can offer benefit. And what we're speaking to is bioaccumulation. What we're speaking to is understanding that animals are a storehouse, right? And in the green here, you'll see animals can be a storehouse of amino acids, making peptides and proteins, essentially, right? That's what I know a lot of people first think of when we say animals and eating animals and meat. We think of protein, and that's true. Vitamins, minerals, microbes, bacteriophages, and viruses. And I put those as benefits. We are using animals to bioaccumulate data, essentially, if you want to think of it that way, another perspective, and going, really, what did that animal eat? And these other categories that really, this is all kind of a mix, and it's kind of hard because they overlap so much. But the other categories going, what is the health of that animal? What environment is that animal in? And then how is that animal's microbiome? And that will all lead into that bioaccumulation story. That will all lead into what are these benefits you're actually getting, because all pigs are not the same, just like all humans are not the same, right? All chickens and all fish, right? Especially if we're talking farmed fish versus wild fish, and then where's that fish caught? And the list can go on and get even more complex as we talk about processing and transportation, exports and imports. Right, list goes on and on. But here I'm trying to just have you all think of, what is my food's food? Because then on the other side of this, there's a kind of a negative perspective to then getting maybe the wrong microbes. That's where you get into like foodborne illnesses, right? You get into bacteriophages in that food, which, for those that don't know, bacteriophage is a virus of a bacteria, right? So, and viruses are naturally found in plant foods as well as animal foods as well. Heavy metals, PCBs, which are a byproduct of plastic and plastic manufacturing, PFAS, dioxins as well, where animals account for 95% of our exposure to dioxins. And even the animals, because of these exposures, will get their own tumors, let alone facilitate human tumors as well, and cancers. You're getting endotoxins, endotoxemia, where just like a human who has dysbiosis or food poisoning or too much of an overgrowth of an unsavory bacteria, let's say, an animal can have that as well. An animal can be dysbiotic. And therefore, if you're eating that animal, if that animal's flesh that you are then consuming has been stored at the wrong temperature or was manufactured and processed in the wrong way, you're creating the perfect environment for microbes to thrive. Well, then we go, well, that's why we heat them, right? That's why there's so many strict standards on properly heating and cooking animal products, right? Of course, but you cannot heat and kill and remove the endotoxins those microbes made. And so that is that endotoxemic effect, which can be, again, a talk in and of itself. But these are the benefits. And also you have to understand the risks of really anything in life, right? Where there's benefits and risks to anything we do in life. And there's the same is true for eating, right? So we have to understand this duality here. So what I've done, and essentially for the last 13 years, was going, hey, I live in a pretty urban environment. I'm not on a homestead in Hawaii, like some of the influencers I follow, right? I'm not on a homestead farming my own cattle and catching my own fish in the pond and growing my own food just yet. I would love to do all those things. But for right now, what is the least risky way for me to live and eat? And I think just as like we can all agree, I don't want to smoke cigarettes, and we're all in this health field, and I'm not going to overly drink alcohol, and I'm doing these things that are less risk for my health. And when looking at this data of going, what's going to put me at higher risk? And in this case, we're looking at health data, higher risk for cancer and heart disease and obesity. And so a lot of those things we then avoid. So for me and my wife and who is also my business partner, where we started this kind of, I guess you could say, this story and this journey, which is now morphed into an amazing private practice, is going, what is the less risky way to live and lifestyle? And we chose a plant-based lifestyle. And with that, we are still getting our nutrients. So I want to kind of break down, these are some of the highly questioned nutrients in a plant-based diet, where we talk about B12 and calcium and vitamin D and folate and iodine and iron, omega-3 and zinc, and showing that you can get these from plants, right? And with some variables like B12, really B12 is coming from microbes. So it's not coming from animals. Yes, B12 is in animals because the animals have certain microbes, because the cow is eating the dirt, because the chicken, as they peck through and grab the insects or the grass or the micronutrients in their feed, they're also getting those microbes. Where even now, though, we're seeing the more modernized cattle or animals living, whether it's on a CAFO or even on a more industrialized farm, they are getting these nutrients added to their feed. So you're still getting a supplementation of sorts in the animal feed or directly fortified in the product. And that's where the word fortification, that's why we use fortification in our food systems, right? So in that same way, I would recommend all of you be on a B12 supplement. Like that is something you want to be on. So B12, but with calcium, whether you're eating tofu or you're doing a fortified milk, or you're taking your own calcium, or you're eating turnip greens or kale or broccoli, there's beans, dried figs, tahini, you are getting calcium as well. Vitamin D, you should be in sunlight. A great app and resource is the D-Minder app, where based on your geography, and you can input, where you live, how much time you spend in the sun, it'll actually tell you how much time you should be in the sun to get the optimal level of vitamin D based on those factors. But if not, you can supplement as well with a D3, K2 vitamin D supplement, but also mushrooms and fortified foods will have vitamin D. And the list goes on to folate, where you're seeing the plant sources, spinach and black-eyed peas, iodine like seaweed. We always keep dulse or kelp flakes, where you're putting some on specifically Asian food. It's delicious. Your sushi you're making at home, or if you're buying sushi and then sprinkling on some dulse flakes, or the sushi will have that nori seaweed. So getting your iodine, iron, nuts, beans, greens, fortified grains, omegas, flaxseed, chia, walnuts, zinc, oatmeal, tofu, cashew, sunflower seeds. And so you can see that you are getting an abundance of plant food. So this speaks to the plant diversity. We're seeing now this massive crossover and going, oh, wow, James mentioned that study of plant diversity. So I challenge you all to think of how many plants do you eat in a week, right? What does that diversity look in your life? Because really this diversity in plants is going to hit on so many check boxes, right? Where obviously nutrition is one of some of the vitamins and minerals that I just showed. And then we get into bigger categories like protein and fiber, but also this idea of like my microbes like plant diversity as well. And we get into the story of prebiotics and prebiotic fiber leading to healthy probiotics. And so we're seeing this overlap in research, and then we're going, wow, and then I can make postbiotics, and then my cardiovascular health is better, and I have less obesity because I feel fuller from the fiber, and I can still get, I couldn't not mention protein and fiber, right? I can still get all my protein needs, whether it's from plant-based sources and a little bit of animal sources, but in this case, it's all plant-based sources here. So whether you're doing a pure or almost all protein, like a vital wheat gluten or a vegan protein powder, and we choose protein powders that are typically just dehydrated seeds that are grind up. We tend to avoid isolates, just that's again a whole nother kind of rabbit hole, but things like nutritional yeast or spirulina. And then, of course, you get into beans and peas and lentils, where now there's amazing pastas with just yellow peas in them that are extremely high protein compared to the protein carb ratio. And then you can add in protein, carbs, and fats, which bring in, pumpkin seed, the tofu or regular tofu, or just pumpkin seeds in and of themselves, hemp seeds and soybeans. So this idea that, which was a big question when we first went 100% plant-based, is where do you get your protein? How are you getting your protein? And understanding really, if you're looking at the science, all protein comes from plants. And I say that because plants through photosynthesis are the only ones that can fix and make amino acids. So when you're talking again, we have to go back to that bioaccumulation of protein. Sure, animals, which we're animals, can bioaccumulate protein, which I do with plants, right? Just like a cow, just like name any of the pig or the chicken, right? You're bioaccumulating protein in your tissue with plants, but really plants are the only ones actually making the amino acids. So then we get into the story of fiber, where for women, it's recommended to get 20 to 25 grams of fiber. For men, it's 30 to about 38 grams of fiber, which to me is pretty low and fairly easy to do, especially if you're eating these plants, which I hope you're getting an understanding of. And the benefit is, well, I need to. Right. So we kind of just break this down into silos. Man, I need to meet my macros. I need to get my right protein. I need to get my right fat and carbs. And I need to get, my vitamin Bs, and I got to get my calcium and my magnesium. And we see this, and I see this with patients come in and they're on like 25 different supplements. And that's my vitamin C, and that's my magnesium, and granted, there is some use when you're deficient. There's use of magnesium and other herbs and supplements, for medical nutrition therapy, if there's other things going on and symptoms, and it can be very individualized. But generally speaking, for someone healthy, when you're on 25 supplements, it feels like you're micromanaging your nutrition and your health, right? And it's extremely overwhelming, and it can be extremely expensive to do so. Whereas what I've found, and what we say with the plant-based diet, is it's really this amazing package, right? Would you like to get one gift for Christmas or 50 gifts for Christmas? And kind of that plant-based nutrition is going like, I can give you that fiber gift and that protein gift and the complex carb gift and the prebiotic gift and the vitamins and minerals and phytonutrient gift, all kind of in that one package, right? So if I took some of these ingredients and made a Mexican bowl with kale and pinto beans and a cashew cream dressing with cilantro and other types, if I'd added a fermented kind of chili to it, and I can in one meal just hit on all the check boxes that I just mentioned. I can hit on the protein I need and all the nutrients I need. And that kind of is the essence of Heal with Each Meal, right? It is just properly building that meal and understanding these components of food and how they make up a healthy plant-based diet. So what we're seeing with that is we're seeing outcomes, right? We're seeing the outcomes. And I highlighted, I think, because again, I could talk for probably 3 or 4 hours on this, but again, this is an intro. I highlighted maybe two of the biggest points of a lot of the research coming out in the last 15 to 20 years, which according to the USDA, 97% of Americans are not meeting the recommended fiber intake. And I'll tell you, when I track some of the meals or some of the days throughout the years, because, I'll get curious. I'll be like, how am I doing? Let me just track some of my average days that I've had and plug them into Chronometer or somewhere that can just analyze my nutrient intake. And I will get double the recommended intake of fiber. There's been some times, and again, this is not for everyone, but I'm almost approaching triple the recommended intake of fiber. And that is because of my plant-based diet. And then at the same time, another point I'll make is we are rapidly losing microbial diversity in the human gut. And so this goes back to what I'll touch on is the inner ecosystem, where we're losing microbial diversity, not just like we're losing diversity maybe in oceans or in forests or rainforests. The biggest ecosystem we're losing diversity is our gut microbiome. And we have to ask why. And really, these two statements are connected. As we are not properly feeding our gut microbes and that inner ecosystem, we will lose that diversity. Just like if you don't properly tend to your garden, or we want to cut down the trees in the rainforest, or we want to overfish oceans and disrupt and imbalance ecosystems, or another way is introduce species that really aren't supposed to be there. Think of food poisoning, think of eating questionable and living a, let's say, questionable or high risk lifestyle where you're introducing things to your body that need not be there, or especially in that quantity. You offset the balance of your inner ecosystem. We are seeing this, right, in the last 60 years, going to like 60 to 80 years really on the onset of this, with these are deaths, right, from heart disease, from cancer, from stroke, from chronic lower respiratory disease, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, chronic liver disease, nephritis, right? So issues with kidneys. And really, I want to highlight a couple here with liver disease. Liver disease is extremely prevalent. And even though these are deaths, I started with liver disease because there's so many living with an unhealthy liver that aren't necessarily dying right away, right? And that unhealthy liver can manifest into GI conditions. It can manifest as obesity, right? So that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, where you're living with just obesity and you're not dead, but you're also not living optimally, right? You're not feeling good. You're not really fulfilling, or living a fulfilling life in a sense of doing everything you want to do or feeling the best way you can feel. And I say that because that is heavily related to obesity, of which we're seeing on the upwards of 50% of the United States population is either overweight, obese, or morbidly obese. This also gives rise to, I know this isn't on the list, but it's highly connected with liver health, which is gallbladder. So I would love to see in the chat, or at the end, we can talk about this more, but who do you know who's had their gallbladder removed? So I can tell you, based on the latest data, about 2.5 million Americans every year have their gallbladder removed. And this is heavily related to the chronic liver disease we are seeing. And a lot of it is non-alcoholic, meaning the hyper-refined sugar, right? The foods devoid of fiber, right? Because if it's hyper-refined, it's not kale, right? It's not pinto beans, it's not millet and quinoa, and it's not, even brown rice. It is a hyper refined food. It is maybe a pasta that's hyper refined. It's a hyper sugary cake that you're getting at Costco. And we're seeing this in just even the USDA data, that 97% of Americans aren't meeting just the bare minimum of fiber intake. So here's the translation. Here are the patient outcomes, right? So we're seeing this in our patients. We've seen this even with dysbiosis and gut health issues in children now. We're seeing cancer on the rise in people under the age of 50, where those in their 40s and 30s are getting breast cancer and colon cancer. We've seen now guidelines changing where it's recommended even at a younger age to get a colonoscopy and screenings for your colon. And this trend will continue because of the other trends I laid out at the beginning, right? That context. As we change trends in the environment, we are going to change trends in our health. And really, this is the story of integrative care, which I think why many of you are at SEU, right? Which is why many of you are pursuing maybe a path in alternative care and alternative medicine, which is a story of integrative care. So for us, plant-based nutrition is the story of integrative care. And for those that maybe a very simplified way to explain integrative care is taking things that seem separate and realizing they're connected. And so at the top here, you'll see on the leaves and on the branches are the symptoms, right? And really at the bottom are the roots. And it's realizing all of this is connected. Everything I mentioned in the beginning and everything you're seeing pictured here, whether it's constipation and bloating and reflux, or you're talking about famine and contaminated water, is connected, whether it's a dysbiosis or endocrine disruptors or poor infrastructure. A lot of these things internally and externally are connected. And it's really because the story of gut health is the story of connection. And this idea, I had to touch on the inner ecosystem because it's highly connected to plant-based nutrition, but it's connected to everything essentially, right? And so really this idea of the inner ecosystem is really one we want to promote and help others to promote, which is saying your inner ecosystem is the most important ecosystem on the planet. And it's made up of bacteria and archaea and protozoa and even parasites, guys. I'm here to tell you parasites are good. I'm not, I'm not making this up. There's great studies on this, and parasites are commensal, meaning parasites are part of your normal microbiome. They've actually have protective and beneficial properties. It's when your ecosystem gets out of balance, right? That there are some fungi that like to be very opportunistic. There are some parasites that like to be opportunistic. And so the story of the inner ecosystem is how you digest. It goes back to that spectrum of going, if your inner ecosystem is optimal and thriving, and it's been for generations, where you've been passed on a beautiful gift of an inner ecosystem, which is for the most part, I mean, it's done by your mother and father, but very much so by your mother, with breast milk and vaginal delivery and skin to skin and human contact and the environment you grow up in. You're given kind of a starter pack of an amazing inner ecosystem. And even myself, and so many of us, have not been given that starter pack. I was thankfully born vaginally, but I was not breastfed. I did not grow up in an environment with great nutrition, right? I was a 90s kid eating Pop-Tarts and on antibiotics every other month, right? Because I was always sick or I had a sniffle. And at that time, they're like antibiotics, 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 right? And we're seeing now how that can disrupt an ecosystem. And so really this speaks to, and kind of the slide you're seeing, this speaks to your environment, right? If you're not aware of this ecosystem, if you're not aware that, wow, what I do and what I ingest especially, but also what I do on the outside is important, and it will affect my inside, right? So in this one study, we showed the pre-industrial, we highly resembled the plant microbiome, and we see this as a cycle where the plant microbiome is influencing the human is essentially influencing the plant microbiome, because I don't know if you guys knew this, but for a majority of human history, we were pooing in the forest, right? We were, pooing and peeing in the soil, right? Probably close to where we lived. If you go back to some of my ancestors in South America, or even here, I have some Native American blood in me from a great grandmother here in the United States as we know it. Some of the Native Americans, they weren't using, a toilet with running water, right? They were burying their poo in the dirt. So you were getting that immediate feedback where your human microbiome was directly interacting with the soil microbiome, and then it was going back to the plant microbiome in this beautiful cyclical way. Now, as we move to industry, you're seeing, all the added variables, right? Our feces, we're not getting that contact. Usually it's going into sewage and drainage. There's hydroponics, there's pesticides, there's this even doesn't do it justice. There were other ones, but there's other diagrams and images we could see, but there are some that are just extremely overwhelming. This was a little less overwhelming, but the point being, we are now in a story of disconnection from our environment, disconnection from our food, and disconnection from our microbiome, right? And that again speaks to the disconnection of understanding the benefits of plants, which we're trying to bridge that gap, right? So another way to look at this, and just another visual, is we are essentially inside out plants. If we think of a plant, the plant is getting and obtaining the nutrients. It grows these roots out into its environment to then use those roots to facilitate what's called a rhizosphere, which is a literal universe in the root system of microbes to help to break down. If you're ever wondering where do minerals come from, it's microbes breaking down tiny particles of rock and nutrients in the soil to get the zinc and get the selenium and get, various elements from that soil, pull it into the plant, and then make an onion or make a fig or make an apple, right? We are the opposite. What's really cool is we then take that product of the plant and we bring it inside, and we have these little root-like structures called villi that stick out, and we have the microbes inside of us from the soil that then help us break down these plant nutrients and these phytonutrients. And then the root-like structures from our body, the villi, come out and absorb them and properly basically organize them and send them to where they need to be. And hence you get into advanced nutrient metabolism and biochemistry and all that beauty. So we are essentially inside out plants, right? So all this to say, I could speak on so much more. I want to make sure I save some time for questions. I want to get into some of the questions you have. Hopefully I've planted some seeds, pun intended, to grow some plants in your brain and get you at least interested. I hope you're interested in plant-based nutrition. I urge you all to just go on PubMed and type in plant-based nutrition, or type in vegan and see what studies pop up. Type in the microbiome, type in, even just type in your favorite vegetable and studies will pop up, and just kind of see what's out there, because there are thousands and thousands of studies in PubMed. And I wanted to give you just a really great book, even Fiber Fueled, by a good friend, Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, who wrote Fiber Fueled, which is, I would say, one of the best books condensing a lot of what I touched on, right? The last research from the last probably about 15 to 20 years is nicely condensed, especially with a very much plant-based fiber and gut health focus in Fiber Fueled. So that was a great book. I was like, man, I wish I didn't spend all those hours on PubMed, and Fiber Fueled had come out about 7 years ago. It would have saved me a lot of time. But Fiber Fueled is a great book. A great organization is Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, where it's physicians who understand the importance of nutrition, the importance of fiber, the importance of plant-based nutrition, and a lot of the resources they have. This goes into podcasts. I listen to podcasts. I'm sure all of you listen to podcasts. And the Exam Room is actually the PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine podcast. And wonderful guests, a wide range of topics and information and education. Another great podcast is The Proof with Simon Hill, where it is definitely plant focused, but lots of great discussions, lots of great things on keto and fasting and you name it. I mean, so many great topics there. And then, I'm sure you're all on Snap or Instagram or some type of social media. So connecting with a great chef or influencer there, which Plant You, I'm sorry, it's a little small there. Hopefully you can see it. Plant You is one of my favorite accounts to just when it comes to food. We all, I think, look at food and scroll through some food or have seen a food recipe online. Plant You is a super talented chef, just really relatable, whether you're a student, whether you're a health professional like me running a company, or you're someone who's a stay-at-home mom. I think it appeals to everyone, where it's super simple, it's easy. She gets into the kind of scrappy cooking where you're saving the scraps and not food waste, environmental aspects. She gets into just the tasty aspects and just the low cost even aspects of it. So Plant You, these are some of the resources I would highly recommend. And hopefully you connect with us, but I want to just again reiterate and highlight some of the main points, which is heal with each meal. You vote, and you have with every single meal a chance to heal with each meal. You also can feel with each meal, which is just being aware and conscious of your emotions and your mental state and how you're feeling when it comes to eating and snacking. Again, we feel gut health is the nexus of all health on this planet. And even old philosophers would say, all disease begins in the gut. We highly agree with that. We believe everyone can be plant-based. Again, remembering that spectrum and understanding whether you're 51% or 100%, you're plant-based. If we care for the smallest, we care for everything. So if we're caring for the inner ecosystem, which again is the most important ecosystem, if we're caring for those little microbes, we're caring for everything. And chronic disease is serious, guys. I'm sure you're looking at the stats. I'm sure you have a family member who either, based on just the statistics, has cancer, has had cancer, has diabetes, or has had or currently has diabetes, or has had diabetes, right? I'm sure one, if not all of you, know someone like that, or someone in your family, a friend. So we need to be serious about this and really understand what's at stake and understand the data and the science. Trying to get through. So I would love Q&A. Connect with us, guys, marriedtohealth.com. You can also scan this to connect with our newsletter or social media. We're Married to Health all over social media. So with that being said, I would love to, if anyone has any questions, and save some time for that. And I see some in the chat, but yes. Okay, let's see. I'm going to stop presenting till I can see a little bit better. Okay.
I actually have a question.
Yes.
So if someone was interested in, I feel like this question kind of stems and it's probably like a case-to-case basis and depends on the individual. But if someone was wanted to switch over to a like fully plant-based diet, is it better to kind of ease into it, or is it possible to just like, if you have like, the will to be able to do it, to stop eating all the nutrients that you're currently taking in, especially like the red meats, and then switching over?
Yeah, wonderful question. We get that question a lot. Yeah, I think ultimately it's based on, are you having some gut symptoms maybe, or what does your health look like as it is today, right? So it can be very individualized. And I would say it's great to ease into it. I ease into it. It took me 2 years to go fully plant-based. So even though I've been fully plant-based 13 years, we're talking about like a 15 years in totality, because the 2 years prior, I was slowly, I would say we think of slowly removing, but I was increasing. I was finding new plants I didn't eat, and I was adding. So we want this to be really a story of adding new foods, right? Have you tried shallots and leeks? And yeah, you may be eating cucumber, but did you know there's like 500 different types of cucumber? There's 600 different types of potato, right? So it's like, start with adding and
Yeah.
see how you feel. And if you're liking it, then continue to add, because there's only going to be benefit even to adding potato, where you're getting resistant starch, which is a prebiotic starch that those microbes love to eat, and then we'll infer a benefit. And this benefit can be different for anyone, right? And for everyone. You may notice I heal faster in the gym, or you may notice, oh, my blood sugar balance is better, or I don't get as drowsy as I used to. I'm a person who doesn't use caffeine, and I'm a busy health professional, and I really don't really feel the need to have caffeine. So it's like, you may notice these things and go, wow, that's really interesting. Let me keep going with this. And before you know it, you may be 80% plant-based, and you're like, I feel great, or you may be 100% and you feel great. So yeah, I say start with adding, and that's really great. And just another point on that is, really no other time in human history have we been able to switch our diet so quickly. So I want to point that out for especially those that are like, yeah, I'm going to go vegan tomorrow. And they're like, oh, I felt terrible. And you hear that online, like, I went vegan and I felt terrible. It's like, well, yeah, because for a majority of human history, in order for you to change your diet from like a keto carnivore, which I would think of like an Alaskan Inuit, and then to be this like fully plant-based, or some even go raw, right? Raw vegan, you would have to migrate from somewhere like Alaska to South America. That would take a majority of your lifetime to do, right? So along that way, you are slowly shifting your diet. You're literally becoming a new person. You're migrating, you're picking up new microbes. And by the time you, if you can even get from Alaska to, South America, you were a completely different person inside and out. So, now we just go to Whole Foods and we pick that. I'm going to eat like a Inuit. I'm going to eat like it's kind of, I say it's crazy because it is, it's mind blowing, right? But we don't realize that our body was designed really well. But if you kind of fast forward it or try to take shortcuts or just push it into this red line state, you're going to get those results typically. So, yeah.
Thank you. And then there's a bunch of questions in the chat. So
Okay. Yeah, let's see. All right. Let's see. I'll just maybe take some in order. Um, would you mind sharing these lectures? Okay. Okay. Hello. Earlier mentioned labels on animal products. What labels should we avoid since there's a lot such as farm raised, grass fed, organic, etc.? Yeah, I love that. That's such a, yeah, I would say pretty much the strongest labels out there if you're looking for just really great quality animal products is certified organic. And then the next one coming after certified organic is certified regenerative organic. That is the newest label because I love certified organic, but I'm in no way, shape, or form defending certified organic as the end all be all gold standard, right? It has a lot of problems, but it's nowhere near as many problems as some of the other labels. And honestly, the cage-free, grass-fed, natural, whatever you want to put, I mean, that's to me, if I had to quickly say it, it's like nonsense. It doesn't really mean much. So if you're looking for something to mean something, certified organic, and be on the lookout, it's probably within the next couple to several years, you're going to see certified regenerative organic, which is going to be awesome. It's another stepping stone in the right direction, in my opinion. That would be the label. Non-GMO verified is still good, but realize that's just for genetic modification and genetically modified feed, genetically modified ingredients into the soil. But there's still pesticides, there's still herbicides and rodenticides, and there could be fertilizers and emulsifiers, and the list goes on and on. So, yeah, certified organic is, I think, you can go to your Costco and find that. And then let's see. I have a question in regards to cooking food. Is it better to be plant-based raw, cooked, or selectively varied? Quick answer to that, selectively varied. I think there's benefit to raw and there's benefit to cooked. An example I'll give to cooked is potatoes. You're not going to eat raw potatoes, right? There's a obvious benefit to cooking your potatoes, right? So when you cook the potatoes, though, and you let them cool, if you ever notice either potatoes the next day or when you leave a baked potato and you slice it open, you let it cool a little bit, it gets a little like more sticky and it almost gets congealed. You can almost peel off a layer, or after you've cooked the potatoes in the pot or boiled them, you see like this white film. That is resistant starch. So resistant starch is something your probiotics, your beneficial bacteria and other microbes love to feed on. They call it resistant starch because it bypasses digestion, your mouth, your esophagus, your stomach, your small intestine, and gets to your colon to then feed your microbes there. And you're talking about short chain fatty acids and B vitamins and protein peptides and various things that we're still discovering being produced from things like resistant starch in your colon that then get transported to the rest of your body. So this is what I mean of feeding your microbes and eating plants. So anyway, I know I can't really give a short answer. It's hard, but yeah, do both. Do both. We do both. Raw and cooked is excellent. Oh, regarding resistant starch, is it true that it's best eaten cold? Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say cold. I mean, like for example, I had some potatoes last night, and yeah, we let them cool a little bit, and we can you can see and feel the resistant starch. But no, I mean, don't feel like you have to eat cold potatoes all the time. But there's definitely, letting them cool. You're still getting that starch. You're still getting the benefit of the starch from the potato, and even realizing the potato can be very nutrient dense as well. Leave the skin on and you're getting those nutrients. And yeah, and then even benefit if you batch cook and there's leftovers the next day, you're getting even more resistant starch. So that's just a bonus. But no need to eat cold food. um, I want to say Odell is commenting, reheating your food will not destroy the resistant starch, which feeds helpful gut buggies, as long as the temperature does not exceed 140 degrees Fahrenheit when reheating. So again, that's getting technical into the weeds a little bit, but if you're really like, man, I want to get that resistant starch, studies have shown that. So as long as you're kind of just heating up a little bit, you don't have to nuke it, you don't have to just completely cook it again, you're just reheating. Let's see. I know, let's see. If you would like, okay, no, I think that's all in the chat. Does anyone have any other questions? I'll try to answer as many in the time left, but
I have a quick question.
yes.
So I forget exactly what it's called, but I think it's called purines, and that's some type of bacteria or whatnot that's from leftover foods that I think are unhealthy for people who have like gout or any other type of arthritis. Would you say that do you even know what I'm talking about when I mention purines?
Yeah, like so purines and pyrimidines. I'd have to like refresh my memory a little bit, but yeah, I think when it comes to gout, God, I'd have to probably refresh my memory on that. But when it comes to gout, overall, like what is your question? So you're saying to avoid that for gout?
Well, yeah, to avoid having leftover food from people who have any other type of inflammation issues, not just
Yeah.
gout in general.
Yeah, and one that I'm a little more familiar with is really histamines, and so that is kind of within the same category and family. It acts a little bit different, but one thing to understand is there's histamines in food. We have histamine receptors all over our body, and histamines are a great thing. You may know antihistamines, right? If you suffer with allergies, and really severe allergies is a sign of some gut dysbiosis to some degree, right? So if you're having severe, even seasonal allergies or allergies to food, that is an indicator something's going on with your gut. So with that being said, when you are fermenting foods and you have gut issues or you have a histamine intolerance, this also gets into mast cell activation syndrome and other immune system dysfunctions and dysautonomia, and the list can go on and on. You'll find that you really don't do well with fermented foods and you don't do well with leftovers. So that is a little bit more, it's gout and beyond, because really gout, you're not properly processing a lot of the histamines, purines and pyrimidines as well, and those are likely getting through to what's called gut hyperpermeability. So essentially that's been very much popularized as leaky gut, but that is a real thing. And I'll try to get through this pretty quickly, but so essentially gut hyperpermeability is you're not eating enough fiber, which we're seeing majority of Americans are not. Guess what your microbes start to do? They start to eat the fiber in your body. So our mucosal layer resembles a nice, delicious carbohydrate. So it is a mucosal bilayer in the small intestine that studies have shown microbes will then start to consume, then basically deleting and deteriorating your defenses. So now microbes who eat the mucus, and it can be more in some areas than others, you'll get this leakiness, you'll get this permeability, and then you'll get byproducts of histamines. You'll get histamine intolerance, you'll get that autoimmune activation, you'll get issues in your joint capsules and your joint fluid, and the list goes on. And for others, it's more intense than others, where it's I got gout, or others will be like, I just straight up have lupus and an autoimmune disease, where others will I get migraines, I'll get hives, eczema, right? These are all manifestations of that. And this is in the literature. So it's just not talked about. It's easier to go, no, just take this pill, right? Oh, you have gout, here, take this gout medication. Don't understand it and understand the medical nutrition therapy behind it, right? So anyway, I hope that answers your questions a little bit, but that is connected to the purines and pyrimidines. Overall, leftovers are great, but again, it's highly individualized. Understand, are you experiencing gout? Are you having those histamine-like reactions? Then yeah, maybe be a little bit more careful with the leftovers. Understand that leftovers are still degrading. So this is where I talk about risk of a leftover piece of steak is higher risk than a leftover asparagus, potato, and lentils, right? They're going to degrade much, much differently. And one is higher risk than the other, for sure.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. And sorry, real quick on that, Dahlia, who's in our chat, one of our partners, top 10 foods and drinks that trigger gout are sugary drinks, high fructose corn syrup, alcohol, organ meats, game meats, seafood. So this is going back to if you have that leftover shrimp and steak, right, that surf and turf, you're going to be producing those histamines and those byproducts of that deterioration much more. What do microbes like to eat? They like to eat that sugar, they like to eat that protein. So you're creating that ecosystem in your leftovers to then amplify any of that hyperpermeability you have going on or that gout going on. So she dropped that in the chat. Thank you, Dahlia. Love it. Love it, guys. Wonderful questions. And so I just want to say, I know I want to be mindful of time. So thank you all so much this was an intro. So hopefully I sparked your interest in plant-based nutrition where you'll go out and learn more. Feel free to come through the references I'll send out if you want to kind of dig deeper into some of the studies. And I always like, when I find a great study in PubMed, I click on the right, you'll see similar studies or similar articles. Open that up and you'll get like 5 more studies that you'll want to read. And I can spend hours on PubMed. So do your own research. Don't take my word for any of this, but understand the data is there, the science is there. We just got to tap into it and really heal with each meal, right?